what I did with Spirit Shield. This one, I don't know how I feel about it yet. Sorry, I forgot which part of the desert I was in. I'm over here. This one, it doesn't just affect your allies anymore. It will affect enemies too if they are inside the circle. So it's kind of like Fireball, just it's a spell with a positive effect instead. And you can move the reticle just like Fireball. So basically, it'll affect everyone in the circle just fine, and it's a decently large circle, and you can move it, but if your enemies are nearby enough, they will also receive the protection benefit, which is obviously a bad thing for you and a good thing for them. But by the same token, this also means that enemies who have Spirit Shield can accidentally cast it on you too. So this will make the beginning of the game slightly easier if you get close enough to the hobgoblins that they would cast Spirit Shield on you while they're trying to cast it on their friends. Chola, you appear so far away. And for Air Shield, it still only affects your allies, but it doesn't affect everyone within the circle. Instead, it increases by rank like many other buffing spells do. So, like, it'll start out at 1 at low ranks, it'll upgrade to 2 eventually, then 3, and finally, at the highest of its ranks, it'll hit 4, and you can cast it on everyone at once. So yeah, things like that. I did similar stuff for the damage-dealing spells, since those are all very similar, like, apart from their elements. One second. Drink. Apart from the elements that the damage-dealing moves use, they're all basically the same. Like, Dragon Flames and Lightning, the only difference between them is, like, how far they reach, really. And with the new spells that I introduced that could only be damage-dealing anyway, it felt like the market was just a little bit saturated with things. It's nice that people of different schools have more options now, but I wanted to make it more substantial, like the variety of the spells. I'm not sure I remember exactly what I did with all of them, though. I think Lightning ended up being like a damage-dealing equivalent of... what's it? The, web, or... not web. Starlight Shield. Yeah, basically, it has a narrow circle, but everything in the circle gets hit by lightning regardless of the spell's rank. Dragon Flames has a wide range, but increases by rank, just like Air Shield. Fireball is the same as it ever was. Exorcism Circle is similar to Fireball, but the ring is narrower, it doesn't have as much range, and it's also not as strong. So it's like Fireball Light for namers. Let's see, what else did I do? I'm trying to guess which one of these guys is the leader. Hopefully that one. The others just leave. Did we get him right? If this guy runs. Well, no. Yeah, we got it right. We killed the leader. So anyway. The star spells... I decided to keep Lunar Eclipse and Solar Flare about the same, since they only affect half of the aspects. It makes sense that they would both work the same. They're basically counterparts to each other. And that's how it's supposed to be. They will hit everything that qualifies for the spell within their range. And they've got a decently large circle, too. They're just not as strong as some of your other options because, or, well, no, actually they're stronger than some of your other options, but they only affect half of each aspect, so that's why. I'm gonna get down this weird old spiral mountain thing. Am I at the bottom already? No, it goes this way. This is the part of the desert that's rather confusing. I should probably not be dealing with this right now. Let's see. To vary those up from Starstorm, how did I do Starstorm? I think I made Starstorm and Reticle you could move like Fireball, but it doesn't hurt your allies, so... It would make more sense if it did, like if it's meteors falling from heaven, they're gonna hit everything inside the circle. But, you know, the spell doesn't even have an animation anyway, so it can be whatever I want. Professional tip, if you're in this desert for the first time and you're trying to explore it, you see these little spiky bits jutting up out of the ground here? They kind of form a little ring and section off the desert. So as long as you stay to the left side of these bits poking up, then you won't really get lost, because then you can kind of like section off the desert in your mind. It's like that area over there with all the rocky terrain, that's like the southern part of the desert. And the part we crossed through before, with like the canyon and whatnot, that's the northern bit. And across the canyon, there's just that big old plain, which is the eastern side of the desert. And it's kind of sandwiched in the middle of them all is this other valley, which also kind of sections off the desert in a way. There's Worm here. I'm gonna kill this Worm. Or scare it away, whichever is faster. You know which is faster, I don't have to tell you. What other spells did I change? Ah, yes. The infamous Wall of Bones and Frozen Doom have been modified now. I think I said that I was going to give them aspects so they only affect half of everyone. And something interesting happened when I did that. I made it so Wall of Bones only affects solar enemies, and Frozen Doom only affects lunar enemies. I ended up giving Gorgons a major buff in level and dexterity. Oh, that reminds me of something else I need to talk about. But I'll finish discussing this first. Like, the early game Gorgons are a lot less threatening now that they can't just freeze your entire party to death. Anyway. And then I thought that this would make Aileron immune to both spells, because since he's not lunar, he can't be frozen, and since he has no true name, he cannot be affected by Wall of Bones. That was like the whole shtick with it before, in the original game. It's like only characters that have true names can be affected by Wall of Bones, for whatever reason. But as it turns out, the way they did that was through aspects. There are 2 additional aspects for spells that are not solar or lunar, and there's no indication of them in the game. I think they're just used to designate immunities to certain spells. Like, I don't remember which is which exactly. I think solar was number 3 and lunar was number 4. Wall of Bones was flagged as number 1, as well as the spell Remove Poison, which I know for a fact in the original game cannot be used on Aileron either. The story reason for that was you can't just learn this spell and be like, well, why didn't that cure him in the beginning? Which is a little bit silly, because Aileron can be poisoned in combat and it is an issue for him. But that's kind of beside the point. The point is, the aspect designation of 1 is the one that makes Aileron immune to certain spells, and Wall of Bones shared that with Remove Poison. So whenever I changed Wall of Bones' aspect to make it so it only affects solar characters, now it can affect Aileron, because those aspects are mutually exclusive. It can't be... Ow, don't kill Cholet, she just got here. It cannot be both solar aspected and not affecting Aileron aspected, if that makes any sense. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Oh well, I guess he needed a drink anyway. I'm just trying to get them off of Cholet before she freaking dies. So yeah, Aileron is now susceptible to Wall of Bones. And, I'm fine with that, honestly. If you want to play it safe when you're playing the game, as long as you have a mix of solars and lunars, you won't have to worry about getting fully trapped by anything but Web of Starlight. And Web of Starlight has a chance of wearing off from Strength. So now those 3 moves, I feel, are distinct enough from each other, that they're, like, better balanced and doing okay. I'm quite alright with them. Alright, so now, the other major thing that changed was with the enemy's stats themselves. Apart from level getting increased, I ultimately decided to go through with what I was talking about before and give them all at least 21 strength, dex, and intelligence. Intelligence was the least impactful of these, because most enemies don't even need their intelligence stat. The enemies with projectile weapons are going to get a little better at hitting you with them, and the enemies that cast spells are going to be more proficient at casting them. Damage was only really a factor for enemies that have damage-dealing spells, like the crab people, etc. But in any cases where I thought they were getting buffed too much by intelligence, I nerfed them in other ways. So, like, even though the crabs have 21 intelligence now, they're a wizard rank, and the spells they cast are reduced. Maybe not enough, actually. I might need to double check on what I gave them specifically, since I know they're problematic. But yeah, that's just one example of a case where I had to reduce, like, the effectiveness of spells. With strength, that was kind of an issue as well. Like, especially for things like the wolves that I mentioned. I'm certain I told you before. I felt like they're strong enough. We don't have to worry about them not being strong enough. So, what I did for the wolves after giving them 21 strength is I reduced their bite efficiency by half. Like, they used to have 6 points in biting attacks, and only, and their bite does like 2 damage or whatever. Or its power level is 2 on the weapon itself. But I reduced their biting to 3 instead of 6. So now, in theory, I guess, they do more damage, like about twice as much, perhaps, but they do it half as often. So, like, they'll have a harder time biting you, but when they do bite you, it's going to hurt more. So I was able to do that for everything's intelligence and strength. It is impossible, or almost impossible, to kill an enemy with a debuffing spell of those varieties. With dexterity, it's a little different, though. Oh, before I get off of the other 2 stats, I wanted to mention the notable exception for the intelligence rule. I left some of the early game goblins at lower than 21 intelligence, but the reason for that is because the goblin sergeants know brilliance as part of their loadout. Oh hey, we got the rare item off one of them. That gem I carelessly picked up. We got the sun gem! It has Aura of Wrath in it. We don't need that because we already got it. So yeah, I set up the goblins in the beginning so that if a goblin sergeant casts brilliance on them, then their intelligence becomes 21, and they become immune to being debuffed to death. So dexterity was something I was much more hesitant to raise all the way to 21, because dexterity is a very important stat, and it affects the flow of battle substantially. What I ended up doing was arranging the game into tiers of sorts, such that, like, the minimum allowed dexterity for a monster depends on how far into the game they are. I divided it into early, mid-late, and late. Those were the criteria I used. Late game, almost everything has at least 21 dexterity. Mid-late, the minimum was 19. Mid-early, the minimum was 17. Oh, I guess I actually divided it into 5. I'm sorry. I counted the start of the game as kind of its own thing. The minimum dexterity for enemies at the very beginning of the game is 13. Beyond, like, the prologue, it's 15. Then 17, 19, and 21. And the reason I chose these numbers is because of how these spells work. The leader's the one still left. I was like, didn't they all just die? No. This one's still here, idiot. Just exercise his ass. Got him. So the way clumsiness works, the dexterity reducing spell. I I went over this before, didn't I? How they do 2 per rank, but it depends on your wizard rank too. So like, if you're a rank 5 wizard casting rank 10 clumsiness on an enemy, it's going to reduce their dexterity by 10 instead of 20. Because it checks the wizard rank first and the spell rank second. If you wanted to get the full 20 out of your clumsiness, you need to be a rank 10 wizard with rank 10 clumsiness. That's how that do. And it's important for how the game is balanced, because that means if you wanted to use clumsiness to paralysis kill a monster in the beginning of the game, where the minimum dexterity is 13, you would need rank 7 clumsiness and rank 7 wizard, which is very high for that point in the game. And eventually that you're going to get enough experience to reach those levels anyway, but the question is how early. Because, like I said, it continues going up. Eventually the minimum dexterity of enemies is 15, which would mean you need 8 and 8. And then it becomes 17, which would mean you need 9 and 9. And then finally, toward the very cusp of the late game, there are only a handful of monsters that have a minimum dexterity of 19, meaning you would need 10 and 10 to paralyze kill them. The maximum rank of both wizard and clumsiness. Which is pretty intense. And then beyond that, a lot of monsters are just straight up immune to being killed that way regardless, so you basically cannot use debuffing moves to cheese the game anymore. Speedrunners weep. I feel like this is a much better compromise for the spells than reducing them to only affecting single targets. Because, while it kind of worked out for the heroes that way, it didn't really work out for the enemies. These griffins are doing some pretty pitiful damage. It's fine if a hero is only trying to cast stupidity on one enemy, but if an enemy is trying to cast stupidity on 4 heroes, that's going to take them a lot longer to pull off. Oh. Glug glug. So having these spells be able to affect multiple targets without breaking the game otherwise was something that I definitely wanted to make sure could be done. We'll see how those stat changes pan out. It's probably going to make the game a bit tougher, but I don't think it'll break anything, just like the levels. The game could afford to be harder, and I don't think it'll be too big of a problem. But we'll just have to wait and see. About the only cheese strategy left is the aura spells like I've been using, and you better believe I hit those as hard as I could. They now cost so much more to raise in experience, and you need to be a rank 8 wizard just to learn them in the first place. The earliest you can get them is Terminor from Scrolls, and those scrolls are expensive now. Oh, you better believe they cost you quite a bundle. And even then, I reduced the size of their circles. So they used to have like the maximum possible size of a circle. They were like it was a value of 10. I don't know what that translates to in game, but it's enormous. Like if you've seen the red glowy around my heroes whenever I'm casting them in battle in this, it's the entire battlefield. It hits everything across the entire battlefield, which is just so dumb. So now they have the smallest possible circle, and their number of targets increases by rank instead of being unlimited. Like, they used to hit everything by default. No, now you need to actually raise the spells to get more targets, and you have to get close enough to the targets to cast it on them. And you need a high rank to learn them, and it costs a lot to raise them. And I think that's just enough to justify them being the way they are.